Mercedes C300 secondary air injection pump. Before we get to the process of changing out the pump, I wanted to go through my diagnostic process, just quickly brief over it. So this had a code for 410 secondary air injection problem, and basically what I did was I checked out the whole system. So the system's pretty simple. It has a vacuum switch here, 2 check valves, a pump, and a couple of vacuum lines routed into everything. So I used my smoke machine here, hooked it up to the switches here, and checked out make sure all the vacuum lines are not leaking or anything. So the vacuum lines are hard plastic lines with a little bit of rubber at each end of them, and sometimes those fittings will snap off on the intake manifold or where the switch is. So after applying vacuum to the vacuum lines and checking the check valves, then my next step was to go and unplug the electrical connector for the pump here. And what we did here was use a power probe like this and put power and ground to the pump here. So I peeled the wire back, and if you look at the wiring, you'll see a red and white wire, and then the opposite wire will be a brown wire. So the brown wire is always going to be the ground wire on Mercedes-Benz. So as you can see here, I'm going to apply power and ground to the pump, and the pump does not run. So you can see here, as I applied power and ground to the old motor, it did not operate. Here I have it out already, and then I'll show you what the new one's supposed to sound like. So I'll apply power and ground to this one. One last step in the diagnostic process was to make sure that the relay and fuses were good over here in the relay box. Because the pump motor seized up, it's a good idea to go ahead and change out the relay, even if it tests good. I'm sure it's going to put a heavy load on it and make it go bad in the future, so we went ahead and swapped it out. If you have a bi-directional scanner, you could turn the pump on and check the power and ground at the plug as well. Now I'm going to show you how to swap out the pump. So you're going to take off the inlet, fresh air inlet right here off, and the next step is we're going to work on getting the hose off the check valve here. If you're lucky, the hose will still be soft and pliable and will come right off. If it's an older vehicle, this may get rock hard and you may have to order this hose. Sometimes they'll break. In my case, it came off with no problems. So on the lower one here, I just ran my screwdriver around the lip of it to kind of loosen it up, but we'll take it off later. So we're going to start taking the pump off. You're going to need a T30 torque socket and a little extension and a 1/4 inch ratchet. And go ahead and crack this bolt off right here. Next, we're going to work on getting the vacuum switch bracket out of the way. It's right here. We're going to get to a couple of Allen screws right here, or torque screws here. So go ahead and crack these free. I'll give you a close-up look in just a second. The first bolt we took off was at the top here. This bracket right here below is what we're working on now. So there's a couple of the Allen screws right there. And then there's 2 there. And there's going to be a third one on the opposite side of it. And I'll show you that in just a second. So go ahead and remove these 2 screws. And these are also T30 Torx bits with a little 3-inch extension here. You should be able to get right in there and get those out. I got a tip for you. So don't take the screw all the way out. Just leave it a few threads left, and then put a magnet on the tip of the screw and then screw it out, and use the magnet to keep the screw from falling down into the engine bay. Once you remove those 2 screws, then right here on the opposite side of the vacuum switch here will be a 3rd screw that you can go ahead and remove, and then the vacuum switch will be kind of out of our way. We're not going to unplug any of the hoses or disconnect the electrical connector. We'll just move the bracket off to the side. Once again, I'll use the magnet to catch the screw from falling all the way down into the engine bay. This trick worked really well. Now that you got the 3 screws removed, we're just going to push the bracket and the hoses off to the side. Now we should be able to get access to the bottom bolt for the air injection pump. Now that we got that off, we're going to push it off to the side. So it was mounted right here. We're just going to push it off to the side like this. Leave everything connected to it. Don't unplug anything. And now we can get to the third, or the bottom bolt here on the air injection pump right there. So just to the left of the idler pulley here is the final bolt. Go ahead and remove that. Now that you got the pump unbolted, don't just yank it out right here. I want you to pay attention to the vacuum lines and how the bracket is routed, you know, with the vacuum lines here. So when you go to put it back in, you can go back in the same way and you don't pinch your vacuum lines here. Now you got a good idea how the bracket and the vacuum lines are all routed. Go ahead and pop off the remaining hose here that goes to the check valve. So I'm using a Bosch replacement pump. I will link this up in the description of the video. That way if you need it, you can find that there. Now we need to transfer over the bracket from the old pump to the new pump. So I just lay them side by side and keep them in the same direction, and then transfer over the bracket straight over from one to the other. Now we're ready to reinstall the pump. We're going to put the bracket behind the vacuum lines and route them over the front of the clip here, or the mount, and then we're going to push the hose onto the pump here. When you're doing this, you want to pay special attention to the vacuum lines. If you route them wrong, when you go to tighten up the pump, it'll pinch the vacuum lines and you'll have a future problem. So go ahead and start all bolts by hand. I recommend you leave them loose, finger tight. So start the top one here, and that'll kind of get you in the ballpark. And then go ahead and start the bottom bolt after that. So you're going to have 5 bolts in total. The 2 longer ones are going to be the ones for the air injection pump bracket here. So go ahead and start those. I'm using the magnet here to hold it and guide it into the hole, and then using my fingers or your extension with the socket on there, and go ahead and start that bolt. Like I said, do this by hand. That way you can wiggle the pump around up or down to help get those fasteners started. Once you've got the 2 long bolts started, you can go ahead and run those in and snug them up until they're tight. So I run them in until they're snug, and then about a quarter turn more, and that should be good. Once you got the 2 bolts tightened up, then you can go ahead and put the hose that goes from the pump to the check valve on. And you can go ahead and plug the electrical connector on the back of the pump back on. Now we're going to go ahead and bolt up our vacuum switch and bracket here. The hoses and electrical connector should still be all connected. So I'm just going to line it up and go ahead and start the easiest bolt I can get to first. The one I can get to by hand. So I'll run that in until it's snug. Then I'll start the other 2 bolts, and I'm going to use the magnet technique here. So I'll use the magnet to hold the bolts, line it up with the bolt holes here. And like I said, I left the bracket loose. I didn't tighten it up. That way I can maneuver it around left to right to help line up the bolts. Once you have all 3 of them started, now you can run it in until it's snug, and then go about a quarter turn, tightening up all 3 of them. Then you can go ahead and put the air snorkel back on. So like I said earlier in the video, since the motor froze up, it's going to most likely do damage to the relay. So we went ahead and swapped it out. It's right here. On this particular model, make sure you check out your local service manual to determine exactly where it is. After that, you can go ahead and put the air cleaner assembly on. Clip the clip on here on the back. Hook up all your snorkels and stuff. Once you got the air cleaner assembly on and your air pump connected to the fresh air port on the air cleaner, put the clip on here. Go ahead and clear out all your codes and go for a test drive. I'm Brian Eslick from How To Automotive. I'd like to thank you guys for watching. Encourage you to subscribe. Invite you to head over to the howtoautomotive.com website for more valuable videos like this. Thank you again for watching.